second, and Brett, you are recording.
Good afternoon, everyone in Aberdeen, and good morning, everyone in Houston and the Caribbean. Thank you for joining us for the third annual Aberdeen-Guyana Gateway. And I think the huge attendance numbers today, to me, just prove the huge amount of interest there is throughout the supply chain in this new frontier of Guyana. And we're joined with some fabulous speakers today that I think will update us on exactly where the market is at. There's been a lot of development since we even held the last gateway last September. We've had a lot of very significant landmarks. We've seen a twinning between cities of Aberdeen and Guyana. We've seen memorandums of understanding between chambers in Georgetown and Aberdeen. And we've seen first oil in December of 2019. So much has happened in such a short space of time. So our speakers will update you on exactly where things are at. There's been a lot happening even in the last week or two with a new government being formed. So I look forward as much as I think everyone else to learning more information this afternoon with the many exciting opportunities that lie ahead for all of us. And I think who better to paint the picture of the journey thus far and where we're at and the future potential. I would now like to introduce from Aberdeen, the Lord Provost of Aberdeen, Barney Crockett. Lord Provost, over to you at this stage.
Thank you, Brett, and thanks to everyone. As you touched on there, I think that it's a very special privilege for me to ask to open up and introduce this particular Gateway event. We do a whole number of Gateway events all across the world, but Guyana has a very, very special place for me. I think that important to stress is that we're not Johnny-come-latelys here. We've been interested in Guyana since the very start, and certainly I have been. And I think there's two reasons for my special interest. One, I think it will produce, I hope it will produce great results for my city. But also, I think the second reason is that it's a fantastic opportunity to see a country that needs a lot of development, get that development in the right way. And if Aberdeen, if it can help in that, I'll be absolutely delighted. As mentioned, we've been interested for, the very earliest time, and really ABBA's company that are involved today, they came to me a very long time ago, and we arranged a dinner to look at possibilities in Guyana. We had the High Commissioner there, very fortunately, but people from business right across the world, and that set us off on the right track. I took the opportunity when the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting to manage to meet the government of Guyana, representatives of the government, including the then president, Mr. Granger, but also including people who I'm pleased to say are still involved in the governance of Guyana, including the then Foreign Secretary, Carol Greenidge, who I was very struck with in the meeting we had. And we took from there, I immediately contacted the UK government. One thing was to galvanize to make sure there's clear support for Guyana in some of the international things that were affecting Guyana, particularly the legal case that sort of hangs around about the borders. We've also had the High Commissioner up to visit Aberdeen. We visited Guyana, which was a great pleasure for me and great honor to meet the particularly people in leadership of the city of Georgetown. We're very keen that we managed to get an Aberdeen link with Georgetown in particular. And we've, as was mentioned there, we've signed a memorandum of understanding, which is quite a comprehensive document for us. And we're keen to see more activity on that. And I think the new government will be keen too. I think that like others, I've been listening literally every day for the news of Guyana for quite a long time. Been a very worrying period, but I think really now we're on the brink of great strides forward, and we look forward to that. I also subsequently I visited the High Commission in London to meet the expatriate community, which has, not everybody knows this, but the Guyanese expatriate community in London has played a huge role in Britain over the years. And so I met some very really interesting people there, including one of my great heroes, Clive Lloyd, that people in Guyana certainly know. So we've had further events. We've had gateway events. We had the delegation from the Chamber of Commerce. I'm wearing my Georgetown Chamber of Commerce badge with great pride today, and look forward to meeting everyone once more, and to having a very, hopefully we'll have a very good session today. And I think that if I can be involved in discussion, I'm totally delighted, either online just now or if anybody ever wants to contact me. Very pleased to speak about anything we can do in the relationship between Aberdeen and Guyana. And even to hear our colleagues and friends in Houston, Andy Grieve and others coming in, that's absolutely fantastic too. And I hope that Guyana can see that Aberdeen can be a very useful partner in contacts with the wider world, not just Aberdeen. And I hope to be very relevant to that myself and to be as energetic as possible. And look forward, I'll be trying to continue the whole performance for Gateway event with great excitement on my part. So thank you, Brett, and thank you everyone in the Gateway event here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Provost, for setting.
Brett, I'm very sorry, I had to mute everybody. Can you unmute yourself?
Hi, thanks for that, Stacey. Lord Provost, thank you for that. Thank you for the setting the scene, and I really appreciate your support with all the gateways. I think, as we know, this is a very special one.
No, that wasn't me, Brett. You've unmuted.
Okay, so without further ado, I would like to move on to the next speaker. So I'm delighted to introduce Gregg Quinn, Her Majesty's British High Commissioner to Guyana and Suriname. So Gregg, I'm hoping you're not on mute and you actually have your microphone on.
I have indeed, Brett. And for those of you see the picture there of me is taken in Gardenstown up near Banff. So that's particularly for you, Barney, and for everybody up there. It's taken last year after offshore Europe. So good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you are. Pleasure to be here again, speaking to you virtually due to the wonders of modern technology. I think the world of August 2020 is somewhat different from the world we were expecting in January of 2020. We are in a new normal. So I've been asked to update you a little bit on recent elections here and what this means from our point of view for business activity and relations going forward. Don't want to talk too long because this is an opportunity for people to ask questions, but let me really put out some of the basic information and some of my thoughts to get a starting point going. So elections held on the 2nd of March this year, a recount scrutinised by the Caribbean community concluded on the 7th of June, and a result was declared on the 2nd of August. President Irfan Ali from the previous opposition was sworn in later that day, and his inauguration took place on the 8th of August. So the result took far much longer than it should have done, 153 days. And we've been very clear on our thinking about that process. But that's now in the past, time to look forward, time to focus on what happens next. The upshot, of course, is that this hotly contested and controversial election means that the new government, as I say, previously in opposition, will need to show quickly that it rules for every single Guyanese citizen and that it is willing to support issues such as constitutional reform to overcome some of the issues which led to those post-election controversies. I personally also believe that there needs to be a reconciliation process, and coming from Northern Ireland, we obviously have some experience of that. On the economic front, which is what everybody on this call is really interested in, I think the fundamental point is that oil is going to change Guyana, and it's going to change Guyana beyond all recognition. Those of you who have heard me speak before have heard me say that several times before. To give you some numbers, so far out of 21 wells drilled, 19 have come up with commercial reserves. Those reserves currently total well over 8 billion barrels of recoverable oil. Now, it is true that 3 of those wells drilled by Tullow and Repsol last year have come up with heavy or medium oil and may not be developed. Tullow is re-evaluating its approach and next steps, for example. But certainly these reserves are, in the right circumstances, also commercially viable. Anybody on this call will recognize that. At the moment, Guyana is classified as a lower middle income country with a GDP per capita in 2019 of some $5,252 US. That is expected to double to $10,990 US in 2021. That will move Guyana from 98th position to 66th in 2021. Quite a change. So what does this mean for anyone interested in Guyana, including all businesses on both sides of the pond? Well, in short, it means a hugely expanded market and a significantly more wealthy population, more affluent consumers and business opportunities across a wide variety of different areas. So, as I sit here, what do I see as the priorities of any government in Guyana, and what will they want to pursue? Fundamentally, oil will provide the funding needed to expand infrastructure, and there's been recent commentary in the press here from Vice President and others about a gas to energy power station to increase power generation more generally. It will also allow building of infrastructure more broadly, roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, but also to put in place a social support network. In short, to improve the lot of each and every citizen. But the government and the people in Guyana will also want to see more local investment and more jobs being created by any outside investor. Bottom line, they want to see Guyanese benefiting from whatever an outside investor might do. There is talk about local content legislation, so this is something that needs to be borne in mind. To me, that means expanding skills across the whole range of industry and business, not just oil and gas. Guyana more broadly needs civil engineers, electricians, plumbers, any number of skilled areas, people whose skills can be used in other industries and are transferable to other industries. So what this means is ultimately, if a business wants to succeed here, if a Scottish business or any other outside business wants to concede here, they need to put in significant effort, building business-to-business links and building genuine partnerships, or setting up local offices, for example. But the key point here is building partnerships with local business. Just to reinforce, the importance of benefiting the local population and ensuring as much money as possible stays in Guyana will be forefront at the mind of this government. I cannot stress that enough. The government will demand to see what the benefits are for Guyana and its people from the involvement of any outside business, particularly relevant for the oil and gas business and everybody on this call, but overall in any industry that might look to come here. Indeed, in his first public addresses, President Ali has been very clear that there needs to be a relationship between the state, the private sector, and international business that benefits all sides. Being brutally honest, if anyone thinks they can come to Guyana, do work, and repatriate all of their earnings back to the UK, that is not how this government wants to work, and that will not be a successful business model. So let's look maybe at some of the challenges in Guyana, and there are some challenges in Guyana. They're not insurmountable, but progress needs to be made on them. First of all, whilst geographically large, about the size of mainland UK, Guyana has a population of 750 to 800,000 people. That's about the population of the city of Leeds. Over 80% of the landmass is covered by forest. This all means there are capacity issues in terms of managing, regulating, and dealing with the oil industry and oil wealth. Capacity is being improved, and a variety of organisations are in place training young people. A better educated and a better trained Guyana is coming, and we are doing our bit through things like achieving scholarships. local training is also being stepped up, and the quality and the relevant skills of the workforce are expanding. As I said before, it is important, however, not to focus just on oil and gas. Attention must be paid to what else can be done to assist wider Guyanese business interests and the Guyanese economy as a whole. This government will also have a focus on the environment. 80% of Guyana, as I say, is covered by forest. It is a huge carbon sink. Large parts of that forest are protected, and Guyana gets significant international credit for what it does on this front. It will also seek to balance oil and the environment. And of course, as all of you in Aberdeen will know, there's been a very clear move for a lot of the skills that have been developed for the oil industry to go into the renewables industry. And so that's a point that anybody sitting in Aberdeen working in renewables, this is not just about oil and gas. This is an opportunity to move Guyana to a renewable energy industry. So there are also chances for UK business there. So on the renewables, Guyana is known as the land of many waters. It's located near the equator, so there's obviously large opportunities for hydro, wind, and solar. So, because I don't want to take up too much time, let me in conclusion say why I think Guyana matters and why I think Guyana should matter to all of you. Obviously, long and traditional links with the UK. We, the UK, are the reason Guyana is the only English-speaking country on the continent of South America. And despite some up and downs in history, and being very diplomatic, there is a huge desire to expand those links. Indeed, many have bemoaned over the years what has been seen of a lack of interest paid by the UK in Guyana and the Caribbean more broadly. That is changing. The opportunities are there. All aspects of the business and industry are there. But we need fundamental changes in politics and governance to ensure everybody benefits, to ensure that all British business benefits all Guyanese business. So let's focus on the need for partnership. And as I said before, I cannot stress enough the importance of partnership and equal relationships. Let me end maybe by saying what all of you can maybe do to further both your own business interests and to do that development of Guyana. You've all been through the ups and downs of the oil industry. You all know how to adapt to new and changing times. You all have the lessons, good and bad. And many of you also know that there is more to life than oil and gas. As I said, the skills garnered through working in the oil and gas industry are usable in the renewables industry, for example. That, in my view, gives you all an edge, a particular set of skills which not everyone has. You can also therefore show that there is life after oil. But you need to put work into all of this so that you can both benefit your business and Guyana with the right approach to working here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg, for giving us your update on the many opportunities that lie ahead for both sides of the oceans and Aberdeen, Guyana, and many other places beyond. So without further ado, I'd like to lead us on to our next speaker today, which Stacey is Ewan, isn't it? Ewan, are you?
Hi, Brett.
Hi, Ewan. So I'd like to introduce Ewan, who is one of the partners of a very well-known and long-established Aberdeen law firm, Stronach, which has offices in Aberdeen and London. So Ewan is partner and the head of the energy division there. So Ewan, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Brett, and good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be sponsor to this event. Apologies for my slightly croaky voice. What I wanted to discuss was the theme of partnership and the history of the Aberdeen Northeast oil industry here and how that might relate to Guyana. And next slide, please. I wanted to start with a film, which is slightly unusual. This is a film called Local Hero. I was asked not to give a legal talk by someone I know quite well, so I thought we'd have a slightly different theme. Local Hero was a film, it's a comedy drama, produced in 1983 by Bill Forsyth, and it was based in a supposed village in west coast of Scotland called Furness. That village was actually, the filming was in Pennon, which is just down the road from Gamery or Gardenston, which Greg referred to. So this is a film about pragmatism, and Knox Oil and Gas was a big upstream oil company based in Houston. It wanted to demolish a small fishing village called Furness, Pennon, and put an oil refinery. It also connected to the fishing industry here, research and development, etc. And eventually the locals and the oil industry sorted something out. The village wouldn't be demolished, the refinery is going to be built up the road, and the oil industry contributed to a large research and development project. So this is really about partnership between local people at that time when this is filmed. The oil industry had been here in the 1970s, but that partnership was quite new and it was developing, and the oil industry. And it's really about pragmatism. Next slide, please. This is about the diversity of the northeast of Scotland. We're quite northerly. We're on the same line as Moscow, but there's a huge amount of industry, and the oil industry started out of a local light manufacturing base and developed into something else. Next slide, please. A little bit about Stronach before getting into the history of Aberdeen. Stronach is a boutique international law firm. We've got offices in Aberdeen, which is our main office, London and Inverness. And as a local law firm, we cover energy, corporate, employment, dispute resolution, private client, and commercial property. But our business is international. We've been to many places in the world and helped different oil deals. We cover upstream, midstream, both in the oil and gas sector, but also wind and other energy sectors, and also the supply chain together with technology. We're just a small firm, we're 110 people, but we're unique. We set up our own publishing company and published 4 books, and they can be made available in Guyana, and this is one of them. And really what we tried to do from a local base is combine technical issues with commercial and legal issues. Next slide, please. Can I get the next slide, please, Stacey? So, a bit about Guyana, we've talked about that already. I think Guyana's story at the moment is a little bit like our story in the 1970s. A lot of exploration, a lot of money being spent and a lot of international activity. This is a great opportunity, but as I'll discuss later, it also opens different problems and issues which can be overcome through partnership. Next slide, please. The Aberdeen story, which may relate to Guyana, is it's just a small city of 228,000 people. We're quite northerly, and oil and gas was first discovered here in 1965, but our oil and gas industry really developed in the 1970s. And it's all about exploration and development at that point. People came into the area from all parts of the world, but in particular, US, Caribbean, Trinidad, Tobago, France, Netherlands. So there was a big change for local population at that time. But what came out in the 1970s is some of the most complex engineering in the world at that point, building the brand new platforms. And these were some of the first of their sort in the world. Next slide, please. but there are always ups and downs in industry. And 1986 was a particular down. The national oil companies like BP, Shell, etc., wanted no longer to have a vertical structure, but wanted to divest themselves of parts of their industry. And that gave opportunities to local people to develop new supply chains and have locally owned businesses, which is the same opportunity for Guyana today. In the 1990s, we moved from platforms to FPSOs. 1992, we became one of the largest oil producers in the world. And then we saw yet another recession in 1998. But that was another opportunity. Oil was about $9 to $10 a barrel. Professor came up with his famous slogan, the Dead Sea, which went into Press and Journal. It wasn't a good time, but out of that developed from Aberdeen and other parts of the UK, the subsea industry, which now the UKCS leads. But also out of that, we strengthened our local supply chains and we dealt with overruns on capital expenditure and operating expenditure. Next slide, please. Again, more change. We got to a mature place where we are in terms of production. We're more focused on production and less on exploration, but we're developing offshore wind and we're looking to the new areas of development. But today, Aberdeen's grown through that time as a centre for exporting goods and services throughout the world. It's an operating centre for the UKCS and the North Sea, and has contributed a lot to our national exchequer and to the jobs. Next slide, please. But dealing with difficult events is always part of the story, unfortunately. 1986 was a dreadful time, very high unemployment in a local area. But that was the opportunity for local supply chains to actually gear up and for local businessmen to take charge of some of those supply chains. 1988, again, one of the world's worst disasters. It was a real learning event for everyone here. And that revolutionized health, safety, environment, because we can't put people offshore without them being safe. And we believe we have one of the best and safest jurisdictions in the world. Again, 1995, climate change politics starts, and that was another learning event, making sure that we, everyone became stakeholders in what was everyone's offshore industry. Again, 1998 to 2002, another crash. Here we go again. But again, out of that, industry developed again, and we began to export more from Aberdeen. No sooner had we got out of that than we came into a world economy crash. And strangely for us, in 2010 to 2014, international investors decided to get into oil. So oil peaked at $120 per barrel Brent. That wasn't good news, actually, because again, we entered another crash. Next slide, please. Another slide where we saw the worst crash we'd seen, and probably something like a quarter of our workforce was out of jobs and employment. However, out of that, we redeveloped again, and we're dealing with COVID. And I think the real story is it's about partnership with across local communities, and it's about partnership with governments and other agencies. Next slide, please. So for me as a lawyer, we were given the opportunity in the 1990s to develop Aberdeen as a law centre. Previously, all the legal work had largely been done in London, New York, other places, but we built up a law centre in Aberdeen. We've got Aberdeen University and Robert Gordon's University, both excellent universities in terms of law training, but a lot of in-house lawyers and lawyers in private law firms practicing in Aberdeen and doing work across the world. And the opportunities there for intermediaries, professionals in Guyana to do exactly the same. Our firm has always been very independent. We've had a number of suitors to buy us, but we also want to be local. And that story about local hero is really important. We wanted Aberdeen to be the base. We wanted to take control of what we were doing and how we treated our own people. So Aberdeen's an effective law centre for exploration, production, decommissioning, but the new areas are now hydrogen and carbon capture and sequestration. And again, there may be some relevance to Guyana in that in the future. Next slide, please. So we've always got problems. There's always change. Institutional investors are going a bit cold on oil and gas at the moment, getting more into renewables. We've got climate change activists, new energy politics. We also have to deal with large reductions in capital expenditure and operating expenditure. But the key in our area is keeping young people and skilled people in the area and adapting again. I also think the key in the area is making sure the environment is safe for people to work in it and having higher standards of health, safety and environment. But again, dealing with digitalization, looking at the possibility of demand infrastructure. So again, finding changes to job structures that can take place. And the final slide, please. So the future is really about looking to what the investors and the markets are expecting, developing our infrastructure and dealing with difficult politics. The key to the future, I think, both in Guyana and to Aberdeen, is transparency. It's a fairness to everyone and it's an openness to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ewan, for supporting the Gateway event today and for your very valuable insights, I think, to the past, the present and the future there. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Ewan, I'm sure you can leave a comment just now, or if anyone would like an introduction to him, let myself or Stacey know and we'll be happy to facilitate that. Okay. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker. So I'm delighted to introduce Owen Verwey, who is Chief Executive Officer of Go Invest in Guyana, which is very much a first point of contact and a landing pad for any Scottish UK business or anybody from around the globe looking to invest, set up and explore the Guyana journey. So without further ado, Owen, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for that, Brett, and good morning all. Like Greg, I tried to bring something that is more British. Unfortunately, the photograph you're looking at is from 2002, but it's from down south. It's from Plymouth. And that's to bring some context to me and the connectivity to the UK market. A lot has been said by Greg in terms of the overview of the Guyana market, and thanks to the Lord Provost, that was a very good introduction for us. If I can just go straight into my presentation, please.
Would you like me to share it for you, Owen, or are you going to share it yourself?
Can you share it, please? Thank you.
Yeah, give me a second, guys. It's not in this slide, but I'll be able to pull it up very, very quickly. Keep talking, Owen, I will get it.
That is fine. So my presentation is largely about the Guyana market, how you can enter the market, some of the basic demographic information that will be helpful to you, and the type of services that we as an agency, Guyana Office for Investment, typically called Go Invest, can assist you with. As we are aware, and as mentioned before, a bit of changes that are taking place from the administrative perspective of government. So some amount of guidance is still being developed when it comes to the policies with regards to oil and gas. So my cover slide here, you will notice is not dominated by the oil and gas. And we deliberately put that into the center of all of the other activities. But that is to home in on the point that has been mentioned before, that oil and gas is newly emerging. And because of the economic impact of it, every other industry or subsector that has existed or currently exists in the Guyana market. And hence that's the message that we're trying to show here. As you know, we are prior to the oil and gas emergence, this market was dominated by agriculture in its inception. Sugar, largely, rice to some extent afterwards. And then we had a long rallying period of precious metal, primarily gold. If we remember those 12 or 13 long years where gold carried economies. And now gold is back again. So from an economy perspective, we have an economy that is relatively well balanced from a natural resource based perspective. The oil and gas is going to be it's going to be that monumental driver that is going to take all of the other sectors to the next level. And hence, looking at the opportunities, while oil and gas is primarily your focus, there are other opportunities in here. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about. If we can go straight to the next slide, please. High level, and I'm going to use a bit of data that is a bit of a year old or thereabout, just to make sure everyone understands. I think Greg mentioned the size of the economy. We're the size of the country, the land mass. We're just about 83,000 square miles. Tropical, it's hot. We do have a currency, which is the Guyana dollar, that is the currency. Your exchange rate, the electronic rate is somewhere around 210, even at this time. If you want cash, the rate is usually much higher. There are lots of influences that cause that to be much higher. You know, we all know that what the GDP in 2018 was, and we know where it's projected to be in the 30% and above range in 2020 and 2021. Below, in the very last section of this slide here, kind of gives you an idea as to the growth by sector, the agriculture, the extractive, the manufacturing, the construction and other services largely, wholesale and retail. Most importantly, as I think mentioned earlier, economy is just about 750,000 people we're looking at. Next slide, please. So Go Investment is an agency. What do? We provide investment promotion and facilitation activities. We do some amount of export promotion and a little bit of policy advocacy. We're in the middle of a reorganizing, and it's been done by consultants funded from the Inter-American Development Bank to look at the framework of the agency as we evolve into the future with a little bit of the oil and gas input, but more or less something that has not been done for quite some time. And also to develop some strategies for us. At the moment, we still kind of focus on nearly every single sector of the economy, and that makes it difficult for you to have a core focus and an area in which you can put your priorities. So that should be completed between now and the end of this year, and we're hoping to have a relaunch of the agency to focus more on the areas that we think it's best to focus on for the next 3 years. Yeah. So a little bit of the regulatory framework under which we are structured and under which we operate. For everyone to understand, there are quite a few acts that are in the legislation that gives us the authority to recommend the incentives that we would typically recommend for businesses that are looking to operate in Guyana. Quite a lot of these fall under the Investment Act and the Income Tax Act, and in various areas where you can research after this meeting here. But my key point is the one at the bottom, which basically highlights the fact that there is an Investment Act in Guyana, and that one mainly protects you as an investor and your investments. And it brings that amount of assurance for yourself and everyone else who's supporting your investment, that the legislative framework is in place to protect your investment. Next slide, please. Again, on the regulatory framework, to work in Guyana, you do need some sort of work permit. But in for arriving in Guyana, the framework is you're typically given a period of not exceeding 3 months if you just arrive as a visitor. For some jurisdictions, a visa is needed. For the UK, you don't. You can arrive, and I think, Greg, you can correct me, you can get a visa on arrival if that is needed and you're not fully British citizen. We're one of those jurisdictions where a passport is needed, definitely in the world today. And you must have certain requirements that the immigration department will want to feel secure that you will not be a burden to the state or a threat in any way or shape to anyone else. Also, in that same there's some looking at the validity of any medical certificates to ensure that in particular you're free of yellow fever and a few other things. We know some of this is going to change with the advent of the COVID-19 era that we're living in. Just to note, CARICOM nationals, they do not require a visa to enter Guyana. And if you have what is called CARICOM Single Market and Economy Certificate, you can come and work in Guyana. So for those who have employees that are already living and are citizens of CARICOM countries, that is a very good item to be aware of. Next slide, please. So why Guyana? We all know that the 16 major oil discoveries from Exxon with, in excess of 8 million barrels of oil recoverable barrels that have been discovered. I've put a link in there to you directly to the Exxon website that provides specific details of each one of those discoveries, from the depth to the quantum of recoverable barrels that are estimated. And that is significant because of the potential economic impact of the economic activities and the revenues that are going to be generated for the government and people of Guyana. And that is the most important thing that has happened probably for this economy in many, many, many decades. But outside of that, there's the need for the support to all of those economic activities and the other sectors that will have secondary impact to go. Just as an example, we can see that gold has gone beyond the $2,000 mark already. It's moving back and forth, but it's still above $2,000. As a gold producing economy, there's a lot there. One of the biggest things that the oil and gas discoveries and the economic activities has brought to the Guyana market is some level of increase in the standards and the health and safety standards in particular by which other sectors operate. We've seen that impact and it's really good. But the support services in those areas will definitely be needed. The existing support and development opportunities required for that extractive industry does exist in Guyana. And therefore, that's a big opportunity for all of the companies out there looking and understanding the oil and gas world. We've got a changing demographics. We've got a very, the Guyana demographics for the population distribution is very attractive. We've got a relatively young population. I think about 62% of the population is under the age of 42 or under the age of 45. And another significant percentage is under the age of 25 years old, which means you've got young people ready to work, ready to, find or refine or advance their careers and a productive workforce. And that is a very good opportunity for others. Professional services, obviously in this type of industry is well needed. Ewan made a great presentation on the legal aspect, and I particularly like the fact that, what Aberdeen did was to look at making Aberdeen a legal center, and because the activities are there. Lots of land available for economic activities, especially in agro and agro-processing. We've been born out of agriculture, and I think there's a great opportunity there to take our agriculture to the next level. And the forestry sector, we can talk about that. We're one of the larger exporters in this part of the world of forestry. We have some rare hardwood. Most of the hardest of woods that you can think about or about, they're from the Guyana market. So Guyana is ripe for that development and ripe for that growth at this point in time as an opportunity for your investment. Next slide, please. Those opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, are varied across the agro and agro-processing. Tourism, we're still evolving as a tourism market. We're not your sun, sand, and sea location. We're your nature, your eco, and your activity tourism market. We're poised between that South American location where you're English speaking, Portuguese speaking, Dutch speaking, and Spanish speaking are all bordering you with the Atlantic for those who like the marine life. But there's lots of undiscovered and a lot of nature that is uninterrupted, that is beautiful to encounter in nature and the ecotourism activities. We talked about the services earlier. And most importantly, what we've seen some growth in recent years is the ICT sector, the information communication technology, primarily the outsourcing. Quite a few of them have been looking at the Guyana market merely because we're English speaking. And the cost advantage and the fact that there's a lot of redundancies that can be placed in the Guyana market to support, in particular, oil and gas and other industries. Why we're not in that. So whenever there are hurricanes in other parts and there are disruptions to services, we don't get that effect here. Next slide, please. So what do we offer? And I'm going to go through this in a bit of a rush manner. There are general incentives across the entire economy, sectorial and specific incentives, and we will mention land because we are also an agency that recommend lands for others. Next slide, please. So on the general side, the high-level things we can talk about, there are no foreign exchange controls in Guyana, and you can take out and you can bring in as much as you would like to and as much as you can afford into and out of Guyana, albeit by the regulations that most countries work with and the mechanisms by which you can move money. But we don't have any controls in foreign exchange. There's a big tax benefit item in terms of the carryover of tax losses from previous years. The only sector that is excluded from that is the financial sector. There are lots of benefits for accelerated depreciation, and for those who are accountants, they will understand the benefit of that on your balance sheet for end of year. And the good thing to note is that Guyana does have a double taxation treaty. And for those who have extended operations in Canada, Northern Canada, there is a double taxation treaty that protects many in those areas there. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, can you just go back one slide for me? For the specific incentives, those range from the waiver of duties, import duties and import taxes on items of machinery, plant, equipment, and different things that you will need for your operations. It extends to not just items that you would need to import, but items that you would have purchased or you intend to purchase in Guyana, where those taxes are applicable. Those are some of the incentives that are available to your investment, providing it meets certain categories. It extends into the aircraft, especially if it's for the operations of industrial activities in particular, and various other areas. Tax exemption, which is the corporate income tax, it comes with certain conditions in terms of the level of investments, in terms of the number of jobs created, in terms of the risk-bearing nature of the economic activity that is involved. So all of these incentives are offered by an investment agreement. And that investment agreement is usually signed by the minister under the discretion of the Minister of Finance. Next slide, please. There's another type of incentive, which is a special one and more specific to some geographic areas in Guyana that have their own social and economic challenges. So Region 1, which is to the very top and bordering with Venezuela, Region 7, a bit of Venezuela 2, Region 8 and Region 9, which are more closer to the Brazilian side. But these are very rural locations. And as Greg mentioned in his presentation earlier, the 750,000 people that live in Guyana mostly live on the coastline and nearer to Georgetown. And so those are very rural and densely forested in some areas, or very savanna-like conditions in those areas. But there are specific incentives that are available for operations that go in. Next slide, please. In addition to those, there's one last but probably more important one to speak about, where there's incentive for exports that are non-traditional to the Guyana market. And at best, if 75% of or 61% of whatever is produced is exported, there's a tax rebate that you're looking at there of about 75% on the corporate income tax aspect of it. That's obviously an attractive one for those who are looking at productive activities that will result in an export. Next slide, please. Starting a business in Guyana, there are many things that we all need to know about wherever you go, whichever jurisdiction, but there needs to be some sort of work permit if you're not legally eligible to work here. Registering a second option, two options that are there. You can register a business name for as low as about 25 or 30 US dollars, or you can incorporate a company, which is often the recommended action for those coming to operate here. You do have to register with the tax authority, which is the Guyana Revenue Authority, to obtain a tax information number. And in the case of where your activities are going to be over 75,000 US dollars per year, you do require a value-added tax or VAT certificate. And lastly, you do require to register with the National Insurance Scheme for both yourself and your employees. Next slide, please. So the process through Go Invest, relatively simple. We deal with both the fiscal incentives for the items mentioned earlier in terms of the waiver of duties and taxes and tax holidays, the best that you can have, and industrial lands and commercial lands. At the moment, we're dealing with commercial lands from one government entity only, which is the Central Housing and Planning Authority, and those are relatively smaller plots of land we're talking about, probably between 1 to 5 acres at most, and it's limited because of the amount of lands that are already available there. Proposal is needed by our agency. We do some processing of it, and then we make that recommendation, just as we do with the investment agreement, and it goes for approval by the representative ministry or minister. Takes about 8 weeks on average to get everything from start to end, and that depends on if all the documents are in. In some cases, it has been done much faster than that. Next slide, please. So we're coming to the end. What I've done is to leave with you some sources that you can get lots more of the information required in making your decision and putting together any business case. And this is a full list of the. But we are always open to receiving information or receiving questions and trying to bring clarity to you and to assist you to ensure that, you know, the business, the economic activities, or the investment that you'd like to do in Guyana, you know, the process is as easy as we could make it for you. Last slide, please. So we're located in Georgetown. Email address is probably the best way of contacting us, especially at this time. We do work via Zoom for many of the meetings that we can't physically meet with people these days. And please look on screen, there's the information that we can be contacted on. It's goinvest.gov.gy, that's our website. And email can be sent directly to goinvest@goinvest.gov.gy. And we'll be happy to support you with those information you're looking for. Thank you.
Owen, thank you very much for a lot of very useful information there on tax, visas, inbound investment setting up, a lot of really useful nuggets there. And I know there's already some people put in the chat about contacting you, and we'll come on to that on the next part. So Stacey, I think the next part that we're moving on to is the Q&A, I believe.
Yes, although just before, because we'll end with the Q&A, I thought you'd want to talk a little bit about the next event and also our media partners event as well. So
yeah, sure. So we've got 2 slides on that, don't we?
If I can just, sorry, for one more quick second, if anybody else has any more questions, please pop it to the chat, because as soon as we're finished with this, we'll then come back to any questions and start putting them out to our speakers today.
So first of all, everyone on this session is welcome at tomorrow's second Guyana session. We have another 4 great speakers with all new content that are also in this session to join the Q&A. So please, everyone today is most welcome to join tomorrow's session. Sometimes people ask me, is it the same as today? No, it's totally different. It's for brand new speakers, brand new content. There was just too much for Guyana to fit into one afternoon. So everyone is very welcome. If you haven't already registered for day 2, please feel free to contact myself or Stacey on how to register for tomorrow. It's the same time tomorrow afternoon. So 3 o'clock UK time, 10 a.m. Guyana time, 9 o'clock Houston time. So, okay, that is tomorrow, part 2 of Guyana. We're also, for anyone that isn't able to join us tomorrow, just going to flag that our next gateway is the Aberdeen-Norway Gateway, which again will be held over 2 sessions, over 2 days, on the 2nd and 3rd of September. And that will be held at 1 o'clock UK time, 2 o'clock Norway time, 7 a.m. Houston time. So that's Norway. But meantime, back to Guyana. And Stacey, I'd like to flag this special report that is going to be out shortly. And this is from Energy Voice, who are official media partner today. And Energy Voice are publishing a special guide to Guyana that will be available digitally as a go-to, very valuable resource kit, analysis, you know, practical information on that. And I think, Stacey, if it's okay, can we unmute Ryan just for a minute to mention a bit about this Energy Voice Essential Guyana Playbook?
I mean,
so you can just have a mention about it.
Ryan will be quicker at muting himself because by the time I stroll through everybody. So Ryan, if you can hear us, just see us.
If you could just unmute yourself just for a second.
Yeah, hi there, can you hear me?
Hi, sorry, I was just scrolling through 140 people trying to find you. Yeah, yes, Ryan, thank you for joining us. And thank you also for allowing us to promote this up and coming guide that you're working on for the Guyana market. Can I just ask you to say a bit more about Energy Voice's up and coming Essential Guyana Playbook, please?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Brett. And hello, everyone. It's a very diverse and cosmopolitan team that we have here today. So it's great to be speaking to you all. As Brett introduced there in this slide, we're going to be launching a special report on Guyana, which we're calling the Energy Voice Guyana Playbook. So the intention of this is that we really present to the international market and people who have heard a lot about the opportunity in Guyana, but really want to understand more about that opportunity and recognize how they can form the partnerships, such as Gregg Quinn mentioned in his opening remarks, and the aspect that Owen discussed there. You know, there's obviously a great opportunity in the country. People are very excited about it, but they need a guide as to how to go into the country, how to meet the right partners, and how to make a success of it. So we're very fortunate to have joined up with Avis Energy and Francis Kiernan as one of our sponsors, and also Total Tech, who are one of the companies on the ground there in Guyana who have great expertise and can facilitate the partnerships that we're talking about. So we're going to bring this report to the market in September. We'll do our own webinar to promote it and some podcast work around it too. And I would very much encourage you to click on the link that's in the slide below me there and register your interest to download the report. So I'm looking forward to engaging with you all a bit further on this. Thanks.
And we will send everyone a link to that in our final thank you for joining us this week on Friday morning once the 2 sessions are over. And again, any questions, pop them in the chat, or feel free to reach out to myself or Stacey. Okay, so I think we're on to the Q&A session now, and we've got about, Stacey, 20 minutes for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've got plenty of time for questions, and I'm just looking there. Certainly, quite a few coming in. Stacey, do you want to?
While we have a quick look through, I just want to address one question which actually came through to me privately, but I think it'll apply to all. Somebody's just asking about registering for day 2. So as long as I have your email address, if somebody has passed you this link, please ask them to send you my email address, and then I will make sure that you get the information for registering for day 2. But everybody who has registered and has had an email from me already, you will also be getting information about day 2 for tomorrow.
And I guess, Casey, the secret there is obviously we want as many people to be able to attend as possible.
Absolutely.
But it's really important that they do register on the Eventbrite.
Well, it's a lot easier because, as you would have seen, you've had a few versions of delegate lists, because when I have some from Eventbrite and then different people emailing me, I get them lots of different directions, and it's very, very hard to manage. So at least if it comes through an Eventbrite, then it's transferred over a lot easier. However, I will be working on an up-to-date list for tomorrow. And finally, because I'm expecting a few registrations tomorrow for tomorrow as well. So on Friday, there will be a thank you email going out to everybody who is registered for either day 1 or day 2 or both. And that will have the most final up-to-date list at that point. So you will have a few, but the last one you get will be the one that has everybody on it. Okie doke.
Okay. So just going through the chat in no particular, Stacey, could I just flag John from EIC. Hello, John. Good afternoon. Is John Peachy hearing me just now? John, are you still with us? John, I mean, EIC obviously are one of our supporters, along with SDI. We're very grateful to both of them. I was just going to flag that EIC are planning an up-and-coming delegation into 21, and Greg, you maybe could comment on that, because I know you had a lot of involvement with hosting the last delegation.
Sure. So EIC were meant to be coming out here to visit us in June of this year, but obviously COVID jumped in the way of all of that, as with so many other things. But the plan is now for EIC to come out first quarter of calendar year 2021. I have a vague recollection we're talking about March, but I can't be 100% sure. Certainly first quarter. But I'm sure if you contact EIC, they'll be well able to give you information.
I was actually going to ask John from EIC if he was maybe able to give an update at the end of tomorrow on how we're looking, you know, in terms of the next step. So I'll maybe send him a message and say if one of the EIC delegates have an update, share with us, if not today, tomorrow, on exactly where that one's at. Okay.
Do you want me to read out some of the questions?
Yes. Do you want to go?
Sure. So I've gone back to the first question that I can.
Yeah, start at the beginning.
Yeah. So Ewan, this one's for you. So we've had somebody ask, why are climate change activists and new energy politics seen as problems? Just something you touched on in your presentation.
So I think that maybe you're saying a problem is the wrong thing. I think in our first book published in 2011, we touched on climate change as an issue. It's an issue in the oil and gas industry because, for instance, FPSOs in the North Seas here have been heavily damaged over the past 5 years. So operating is more difficult. The village behind me is Pennon. That's been painted in 1955. That's where my wife's family come from, but the storms would never get up to the shop, which is in the picture. They will now. And the cliffs behind there, just further on the right, came down. So these are all what I call problems and issues. And the opportunity is to change that by sorting out net zero carbon emissions. And I think huge amount of investment, capital investment to start that process of the next few years of capturing carbon. Some people are against that, or dealing with it in other ways, because that is one of the big issues of our generation. I see an issue as an opportunity. That's an opportunity for all of us, for lawyers, for engineers, etc. So I see it very much dual-faced.
Thank you. And that's always the best way, is look at issues as opportunities, because you always lead to something if you can. We've got a question from James Fox. James, I'm just going to read out as you've written, because my ignorance, I don't quite understand exactly, but I'm sure the people on the call will do. So James has said, my research highlighted the integral role of GIZ, G-I-Z, and Enable, etc., in developing local content in Uganda for the oil and gas industry. Is the IADB or any other donor organizations playing a role in requisite skills development in Guyana? So any of the speakers that can answer that, please feel free to jump in.
And that, Stacey, could be just say today's speakers. We've also got the luxury of having tomorrow's speakers. That, so if, you know, if any of the Bobby, Francis, you know, Nicholas, if any of you feel, Adam, if you feel you can add value there, please feel free to answer.
I mean, I'm not an expert in the field, but I think that from reading the early comments of the new government that High Commissioner Quinn mentioned, that they will be very much looking at models from outside that deliver exactly the things that the speaker was speaking about there. So Uganda has played a leading role there, but I know that the new government will be looking for advice and to take models from elsewhere on exactly that sort of target. And I think that both the you know, the Go Invest person, you know, speaker, and the High Commissioner both sort of touched on that. So, and I hope that in people in Aberdeen that we can be helpful in trying to come up with suggestions, experiences we've had, and try and fit with that. We obviously realise that developing the human capital in Guyana is going to be the secret of getting business development there, and I think that that'll be a high profile for all the companies that are listening in today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think certainly, Lord Provost, that I think you're right about the models that are being looked at elsewhere. There's also a lot of focus, isn't there, on local content in Guyana just now, and how to maximise that.
Brett, can I just maybe jump in a little bit on that, which is that the new administration has talked very much of local content legislation, whereas the previous administration had talked about local content policy. I think they're still fleshing out what exactly they mean on that. I'm not, although I stand to be corrected, I'm not 100% sure what international involvement in terms of the development agencies like the IGB and such like were involved in the previous local content policy. I know there were international individuals involved in drafting it, but I don't know if they did so under the aegis of a development agency.
Okay,
right.
thanks for that, Greg.
Added something to what was said by the Lord Provost and High Commissioner. Local content is a big play on the agenda for the oil and gas development, as we've heard from the inaugural speech by the new president of Guyana, President Ali, so from the vice president of Guyana right now, that local content and the development of local content adherence to making sure that there is maximum economic benefit for the economy as well as for the investors who are coming in. What is going to be happening, as we can see from those different indicators, is that we have a draft policy, which of course will be looked at in detail for specific areas of the industry as a whole, and then of course legislation must be part of the process. In local content, just to add a little value to it, local content policy and legislation must work together. So I think that is the direction in which Guyana is going. Just to shed one light on the fact of international agency The development of the local content policy that Guyana has right now has been over a series of drafts. And one international agency would have helped with that in terms of funding, and that would have been the UNDP. Moving forward, we will see what direction local content will take in terms of the specifics of the policy as it relates to the various subsectors of the industry. We do know that local content deals primarily with linkages, backward, forward, and lateral linkages of an economy. And of course, you must have the legislation in place to protect both the operator and the government, as well as the local industry.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for some very comprehensive answers, and I hope that's answered the questions. So a further question we have, a little bit about an explanation and then a question from Kevin. So Kevin says that on the Exxon and Total oil and gas block, so he did the economics for the Qatar Petroleum entering Guyana in, oh gosh, I can't pronounce those one, Kevin, or Orinduk and Kanaku. Anyway, he did those. So royalty and corporate income tax are paid on the contractor's behalf by the government. With the focus on attracting revenue for Guyana, how much will these very attractive terms continue to change while continuing to be attractive to foreign investors in a competitive climate? So he's just looking for opinions.
Bobby, you've got a lot of economic knowledge and on that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, of course. Yes, and just for the pronunciation, it's the Orinduk and Kanuku blocks. The fiscal terms in Guyana is based on a production sharing agreement with the oil company and the government of Guyana. It's a case of where there is a cost recovery of 75%, and then there is a 50-50 share of the next 20%. However, off the top, there is a 2% royalty. So that comes out from the beginning once production starts. Moving forward with the different blocks and the different operators, I think the new government has also indicated that this is something that they will look at in terms of what would be the best approach in terms of the fiscal packages that the companies who are already in place and those who will be coming in will work on exploring, and also if there's any level of production to be taken from these new areas of hydrocarbons development. So just the one correction in the question there, it is the taxes are paid on behalf of, but the royalty comes off the top. And of course, after cost oil and cost recovery, there is the 50-50 remaining share of the profit oil.
Thank you, Bobby. That's very concise and professional answer. So thank you for that.
Brett, can I just put something? I think one thing to remember is that the Guyana of 2020, in terms of recoverable reserves and such like, is different from the Guyana whenever the previous PSAs were signed. So I think it's important to remember that the market and the opportunities here are different. So therefore the approach to them might actually be more different. So simply because it was the terms were set for a previous PSA, for example, I think it would be wrong to assume that you should get the same terms for going forward because that PSA was signed in a different world.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I was just saying in the chat to everyone that if you're not connected with myself and Stacey, please do feel free to connect on LinkedIn, because then we can keep you updated with the Gateway initiatives. I think we've got a comment there, Stacey, from Quanta EPC, just saying that they're going to be in touch with Owen. So Owen, expect to hear from Jason at Quanta EPC.
I have what I was doing is I'm just making sure I'm getting the questions answered. But what I will do now that you've suggested, I was actually thinking this as well, that when I send the follow-up email, I will include links to both you and myself on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to send us a request, it'll be very easy to do so. Also, if I have put it in the emails and will continue to do so, to join the group, because you will be able to reach the speakers and be able to communicate through the group as well on LinkedIn. And when we are connected, I can also invite you, but if you just send me the link, I can then let you in. So various ways, but we will make sure that if there's somebody you want to chat to, that we can connect you to them. Just let us know and we'll help to facilitate that. We're still good for time, so that's fine, because before we go, I think, Brett, it'd be good if you can just give everybody a rundown of who's speaking tomorrow. But if we can answer Travis Potts.
To the next question, to Travis, yeah.
Yeah, so Travis says it's an important development for Guyana. So, however, how does this sit with the global climate goals under Guyana's commitments and lay in the foundation for energy transition in a rapidly changing global energy context? And will CCUS be part of the developments?
Okay. Have we got anybody? Greg, do you want to touch on a little bit about that? Because there is some thoughts on balancing the portfolio, isn't there?
I mean, the way I think this should be looked at is very much the oil and gas, the funding or the money that comes from oil and gas will provide an opportunity to fund the transition that this country and this government is committed to, away from fossil fuels to renewable fuels. So I think there's a very, I mean, my position would be that that is a good thing. At the moment, a lot of the generation of power, for example, that is done here is done using heavy fuel oil or diesel, which is not particularly climate friendly. If the oil and gas production allows us to move to more environmentally friendly power generation in the first step, as this suggestion of going from gas to power, and then allows a full transition across to renewables such as wind and solar and hydro, then that is in the longer term a good thing and worth supporting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So Stacey, just to keep the time, so we close on time, I think there's one question left to answer. Is it James's question?
So I think this is a follow-up to his original question. So I'll read it all out. So he has said thank you, first of all. So this is from James Fox. And if I could just take this opportunity to underline the importance of a multi-stakeholder approach to developing requisite skills development. For example, there are many Scottish TVET institutions with the capacity to deliver skills development on the ground in Guyana. However, it is vital that an organisation is funding and managing that process. I doubt operators, sorry, I'm not understand, would fund this. I would assume that the government of Guyana will also struggle to fund these local content development interventions. As we know, regulation, legislation and contract mandates are pointless if local capacity is insufficient. Very sorry I read all that. It's not an actual question, but a point, but I think we'd still welcome feedback, what anybody thinks on that.
Owen, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I think that is a good point to highlight. Greg has started answering part of it, and I think Bobby provided some comments in relation to it. The local content aspect of things have been in the works for quite some time, and getting a complete grasp of it and to determine what is the best methodology of working with. I think that is in the works. We've heard comments in the media recently of where this government intends to go, and I think some there probably will be taken into account. The comment is a bit correct. Not sure the operators are going to fund all of it. It has to be a bit of government, operator, and other stakeholders to make it a reality and to ensure that that true benefit of all stakeholders, and in particular the Guyanese and the Guyanese youth, benefit from it. So I think it is a good point to highlight here, and something is in the works that will bring that to fruition. And
Brett, of course, you've got Total Tech, who I think you talked about supporting tomorrow. Total Tech, which is a Guyanese training institute, which is set up partly supported from UK financing, uses Scottish vocational qualifications for a lot of their training as well. So there is this developing training capacity here in country that is growing and growing and growing, supported by Guyanese and outside investors. There is room for a lot more, though. Definitely room for a lot more.
So I think what I'd like to do at this stage is thank all of today's speakers once again. So huge thanks to Lord Provost and to Commissioner Quinn and to Owen, and of course to Ewan at Stronach. And if anybody feels they don't have the contact for today's speakers, would like to reach them, just feel free to get in touch with myself or Stacey. Now tomorrow, I'd just like to promote tomorrow's speakers very quickly. So tomorrow we're joined by Nicholas Diego of the Georgetown Guyana Chamber, and he's their president, and he'll be updating us from the Guyana end. We've also got Adam Gibson, that's helped a number of firms set up in Guyana and is working with a number of firms right just now. We have Bobby Gasai, giving us some economics thoughts and updates tomorrow. And last but by absolutely no means least, we have Francis Kiernan of IBIS, who was very much instrumental in putting Guyana on my radar. And Francis is going to share some thoughts with us on his thoughts of where the Guyana journey is at and how IBIS can assist and work with companies. So I think, Stacey, is there anything you'd like to mention about people joining tomorrow, or?
Well, I don't think there's any much more to be said. I will make sure that the join instructions go out, that everybody has the link and the passwords in case you need it. And other than that, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you very much, and I hope you've all enjoyed it.
Yeah, now if anybody does want to spill over and ask today's speakers a question beyond the time, myself and Stacey will be online for the next little bit. We won't drop off just quite yet, but for those that have to go, we'd very much like to thank you all for giving your precious time, and it's been marvellous to see such huge interest in Guyana this afternoon, and such a cosmopolitan audience, so huge thank you to everybody that participated.
Thank you very much, everybody.
And a huge thank you also to our supporters, Stronach, the British High Commission, Department of International Trade, SDI, EIC, and also Adam's companies that he represents, OES and Acaris. So thank you very much for all our supporters, and we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully all tomorrow. Stacey, also huge